So a couple months ago, I made a theory about the BERGENTRUCK, and now Tricky Tony, that sly dog, said, "Oh, by the way, Deltarune and 15 Tomorrows," in one of the worst Nintendo Directs in history. That's actually a controversial company. I don't know if I should put that in the video. Who cares? It's in the script. Who cares? This calls for a revamp that I was planning anyway. Without further ado, strap on in, because I'll tell you why the BERGENTRUCK is real. Let's start with the okay, I'm recording, right? Let's start with the motif of cause. That's my final point in the previous video, but I believe it's best to start with it in retrospect. Deltarune has a motif of cause recurring to the entire game. While it isn't immediately obvious, it is tied strongly to inevitability. Inevitability as a theme is prevalent in the entirety of Deltarune, with the antithesis being your choices don't matter. While most of this theme is presented on a surface level, given that it, or its counterpart, your choices do matter, is explicitly stated multiple times per chapter by different characters. There are two other ways in which Toby Fox presents this theme: freedom and cause. Freedom isn't important in this theory, but I'll touch upon it, so down to 0.5 if you want to see it. Were free in a sense, it was supposed to be. They conform to antithesis. As for Preston, he tries to teach us to go against inevitability and tells us that to do so we need hope. Don't write dog. Well, he doesn't choose to move for failure. It isn't really current chapter. Go back to my now. As for cause, the connection is more subtle, but if looked at, it seems obvious. In chapter 1, we are forced to go to school due to a car. Already we see this inevitability that is attached to cause. Chapter 2 has a lot of references to cause. First, a traffic jam forces us to stay in the school library area. Then we start to drive a car, but the moment we do, there is another traffic jam in the Dark World, which coincidentally forces us to meet Spamton, one of the most important characters by anyone trying to explore the meta-narrative of Deltarune. Chapter 3 doesn't have anything I could think of that explicitly shows this connection, but what could possibly be the case is that the third board, the one that coincidentally emphasizes cause, is skipped, and the consequences are us being trapped. Therefore, inevitability itself is inevitable, so if we don't receive it via cause, it's forced onto us. Chapter 4, we see the famous prophecy panel, the Queen's Chariot cannot be stopped. This directly states this connection of cause to inevitability. It could be argued that it is a double entendre, not only stating the past with the Chapter 2 cause section, but could still prophesize the future, telling us that a different Queen's Chariot shouldn't be stopped. The only two queens that we know of are Newbert and Toriel. However, Newbert has gone up too far into the world, and now earthly matters do not concern him. Therefore, Toriel is a more likely candidate, given that Asgore is also described as a flower king, so Toriel would therefore be a flower queen by this logic, and because of her role in Undertale. Okay, so we've established a recurring motif of cause. It only makes sense that in the future chapters this motif will stay consistent and will show itself as a way to present inevitability. However, how do we know that the way in which this will be done is by driving Asgore's truck or being driven by Asgore, let alone have future symbolism be tied to said truck specifically? Now you might think, oh, well it's obvious. It's an Asgore chapter and Asgore has never seen a W, so it's only natural he sees one now. Well, yes, but that's not enough. Asgore being a focus of a chapter and cause being a major motif in the game both to open up a feasibility of the BERGENTRUCK being important in Chapter 5, but it does give us a good foundation to make sure that a chase scene like this doesn't appear out of nowhere. However, there is one piece of dialogue that pretty much proves my point. Upon interacting with Asgore's truck, Susie says, "Alright, Chris, you handle the driving. I'll be the turret, I'll be standing, throwing dirt and stuff." This, ladies and gentlemen, is called a Chekhov's gun. This, ladies and gentlemen, is called a Chekhov's gun. Basically, Chekhov's gun is when the description says that a gun that's built in Act 1 must be in Act 3. So, for instance, if Dr. Doom fails to place death in Act 1, then it should be routed later and vice versa. It makes sure that not only is this type of wasting on unnecessary detail, but it's also all the anticipation that Dr. Doom later doesn't appear out of nowhere. Asgore's truck has been established as a weapon to be used by Chris and Susie, in a game where cars are a motif and that represent inevitability, treating this sort of thing as a joke or a red herring that wouldn't be at least mentioned in the future chapter would objectively be bad writing. Sure, Toby Fox could be a tricky Tony and have that be a red herring and make it work, but contrary to popular belief, this subversion is the exception as opposed to the norm. Toby Fox usually follows basic storytelling concepts, such as foreshadowing and parallelism, which I covered in another video, because subversive storytelling still needs to be based on audience expectations. Therefore, a chase scene in Asgore's truck will not Therefore, the chase scene in Asgard's truck will not only develop the theme of the cars by, for instance, showing us taking fate into our own hands, but will be one of the only ways through which we can discharge Chekhov's gun. Obviously, Toby Fox will have two separate car-related scenes, but it's better to look for the explanation with the least amount of assumptions, aka Occam's razor. I'm assuming we'll have one car chase scene, which trumps assuming we'd have two in this case. Up to this point, the video was looking at chapter 3 and 4 without context of the new trailer. I would show my reaction, but I didn't record it, and if you want to know it was anyway, immediately call my mother telling her Deltarune is coming. I was at a bus stop, I didn't know how to react. Nevertheless, let's discuss the trailer. Side note, this does add evidence to a different theory that I have, but I'm not really bothered to make a dedicated video for. That chapter 5's Dark World will be a living dark world. I might talk about it in my crack theory bingo card video that will definitely release, though. Definitely. Put all your life savings on like. Initially, I thought that the trailer actively disproved my theory due to the focus being a typical adventure, as stated by Toby Fox, similar to chapter 1 and 2. This means that we probably won't have anything crazy in the Dark World. I expect it to feel like an in-between of chapter 2 and 4. However, let's talk about what Toby Fox said. He explicitly said, I want to surprise people who will play the chapter for the first time, so I avoided showing the most exciting moments. He said that. Yet Super Saiyan Nubert made the cut. This has implications for the events of the chapter. Given that SS Nubert is relatively tame compared to the rest of the chapter, even if it isn't in terms of ridiculousness, but in terms of cool factor. Therefore, we can't expect for Toby to hold back from anything, including a possible chase scene in a BERGENTRUCK or an adjacent chariot. Additionally, this dark world in of itself is unlikely to have any cars. As established, this is an integral motif in Deltarune. Last time we had it absent for an entire 2 chapters. We had the largest Chekhov's gun known to man, followed by the closest thing to confirmation of this motif as an intentional one. The festival means the streets will be closed, and the Japanese aesthetic for the chapter is unlikely to make space for any mentions of this motif of cars, unless it is a chariot. At the end of the chapter, or in the next chapter, this will likely be made up. However, we already loaded Chekhov's gun for one makeup. Pretty much confirmed the motif in the second time Toby Fox made up for it, and now he'll likely need to make up for it a third time. Yet we have a loaded gun currently being held by Asgore, and someone must discharge it. However, where will it take place? Frankly, I doubt it will be a Dark World, given that we had 3 Dark World appearances already, so force wouldn't be as high. Additionally, the Dark World doesn't need a truck, it already has Super Saiyan Nubert. It is a joke. I know he's probably too busy protecting Castle Down as its queen. What will be really cool, and we can go off the rule of cool here, given how ridiculous the chapters imply to be. While pushing the story forward is seeing Xenorord Knight in the Light World. Given that the Knight avoids conflict in the Light World, we can imagine we'd need to chase the Knight. Alternatively, we might need to run from them. Where though? Well, if it is in the Light World, there is one candidate, the Taped-Off Road. Now that Undyne isn't there, I doubt there would be anyone to stop us. There is another Chekhov's gun situation too, given that the road is dangerous. This will mean that there will be some sort of unique gameplay if we were to drive there. Additionally, Toby Fox said, in chapter 4 we saw dark clouds on the horizon. That's why, let's not look there now. Let's turn around and watch the sun, before it goes out completely. We're turning away from dark clouds. They'll be behind us.
Rolling.
Well, this isn't my theory, but it shows that this theory is compatible with other theories due to how flexible the concept of chase scene versus the Roaring Knight is, even while taking into account that Asgore's truck is an integral part of the theory. So yeah, that's my revamped theory. Tell me what you think in the comments and
Subscribe.
my camera looks like an old memory.